Hello and welcome to the shop. Today I'm going to be turning a kit that I've never turned before. It's called the Shakespeare. I got it from Chad Schimmel over at Turner's Warehouse, and it comes in a really nice little package here. I got a set of bushings as well from Chad. There are 4 bushings associated with this pen, and I have a blank here that I got from Andy Cohen. This is from Christ King Church, which is where Harry Potter, if you saw the Harry Potter movie, that's where Harry had the sorting hat placed on his head and was assigned to Gryffindor. So this should be a fun, I've already got this thing tubed and I've already got the ends squared. I'm ready to go straight to the lathe. We're gonna turn this special blank, we're gonna put it on this new kit, and we're gonna see just how it goes. The bushings that Chad sells for this kit are turn between center. You can see they have the 60-degree cone cut in them, as well as pass-through. So you could use these on a mandrel if you didn't want to turn between centers. Go ahead and get this first one chucked up and ready to go. And just like that, we're ready to start turning. This blank turned exceptionally well. I'm very happy with how it looks, but there is a small issue, and you might notice it as you look at the blank. Oak's a very open-grained wood, and when you turn it, you bring your tool up to the wood like this, and as you cut, most of the fibers get cut away. Some of them don't get cut away. They get laid down, and they get laid down in this direction, see? So it's just like smashing them down with your fingers if you just went down and pushed all the fibers that way. So what we're going to do is we need to combat that. In order to get an open grain wood to look good, you need to sand against the grain. Now what you can do is reverse your lathe, and the sandpaper will be on this side, so as the grain that is laying down hits the sandpaper, it lifts the grain and allows the sandpaper to remove it. We will reverse our lathe between each grit of sandpaper. Now what we're going to do, many of you don't have a reversible lathe, so we're going to do this the old-fashioned way. We're going to loosen up our tailstock, going to remove our blank, and we're just going to rotate it like that. You can do the same thing on a mandrel. Put it right back in the tailstock, and now we are ready to sand this. All of the grain is pointing this way. So as I run the paper along here, I'm going to stand it up and shear it off. Flip it, go to the next grid of sandpaper, do the same thing, and that is how we're going to get a really nice finish on an open grain wood. I've got the lathe set to about 750 RPMs. This oak is really dry, and if I go much faster than that, I'm afraid I'll just take too much away from the blank, and I really don't want to chew into it. I just want to smooth it out and get rid of the tool marks and have a real nice fit at the bushings, which luckily I was able to turn it down very nicely. You can see there's a lot of material coming off as we sand with the grain, and that is because we are lifting it and removing it. I'm going to go ahead and shut the camera off, get my dust collector on, because you can probably see the dust rising. I mean, look at that. That's what I'm dealing with, and that's what it's putting into the air. I don't want to breathe that, so I'm going to get my dust collector on, and we'll finish up with the paper, and we will, as I said, flip the blank between each grid. I want you to take a look at that blank. It's sanded very nice. It's actually shiny, which is kind of unusual for oak because of the open grain we spoke about. But by flipping it back and forth, we were able to really get those little those nubby grains sanded down. Also, I wanted to point out, in between, I take my sandpaper while the lathe is spinning and I work it back and forth, and then I stop it and I sand from end to end manually, rotating the lathe by hand to get any centrifugal scratches that I can see out. And I'm looking it over right now. I don't see any scratches left. I actually see one right there. I'm going to get my 400 back and we'll just lightly take that scratch out. But other than that, I think the blank looks really, really nice. I took those little scratches out with my 400, just sanding with the grain. It didn't take much at all. They were actually fairly light. The blank looks great. What I'm going to do now is we're going to get the other blank on the lathe. We'll get it turned, and then we'll clean and finish them both at the same time. just finished sanding this blank, and just notice how smooth and shiny it is. Once again, I used the flip method between grits, and I got a really nice finish, and it feels amazing. I just put the blanks back on the lathe. I've got my turn between center bushings between the blanks, and I'm just going to wipe with the grain. My objective is to get any sanding dust that might have settled between the grain out. Now, take a look at that. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn the lathe on. I sanded at about 750 RPMs. I'm turning right now at about 550, which is the slowest my lathe will go. And now I'm just going to wipe with the lathe spinning. We'll shut it back off. And one more time, I'm going to get a clean paper towel. And I'm going to finish by wiping with the grain, because as I look at this, some of the grain kind of raises. And what's happened is it's caught little bits of the paper towel. And I just want to make sure that I get all of that off of the blank and the bushings before I start putting a finish. It looks pretty good. I'm going to let this thing sit and spin for a few minutes. You can see the blank, denatured alcohol starting to kind of evaporate. We'll let her spin for a couple of minutes, make sure it's fully evaporated, see how much lighter this one's getting. And once it's gone, we'll come back and apply a finish. The blank has had plenty of time to dry. I'm not going to touch it with my hand, but I am going to kind of run my finger under the blank with the tape. And I don't want to say it's burnishing it, but what happens is with the denatured alcohol, it will raise the grain a little bit, and you don't want to touch it. If you touch this with your fingers, the oil from your fingers can actually transfer to the blank, and then you'll get a blemish below your CA. But what I see now is after just using the tape and lightly running it under, the surface is now nice and smooth. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and start applying my CA finish. I have the lathe spinning at its lowest possible speed. For this lathe, that's about 560 RPMs. I'm really expecting it to take quite a bit of CA glue because these blanks are very, very dry. All right. Turn the lathe off. We'll take a quick peek. And you can already see dull areas starting to show up on the blanks. And what that is, that's the CA soaking in. So we're going to continue to apply CA. I generally go about 5 coats, but on blanks like these that are super dry, I may do more. And what I'll do is each time I apply a coat, I'll let it dry, and then I look for dull areas. If I see a dull area, I apply another coat of thin. That's my general rule for applying thin CA. Once the blank looks shiny, then it's ready for a couple of coats of medium to kind of top it off and give it some thickness. So I'm using the thin as more of a sanding sealer. So that's why we're watching, like, see how dry it is right there? That's why we're watching for those spots. It's ready for a second coat. Let's go ahead and put that on. I'm letting a liberal amount drool onto the blank, but I'm trying not to put so much that, you know, it goes everywhere. You want to be careful because this stuff is like water. We'll flip it off and we'll take a look. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and shut the camera off to finish this. And the reason why, CA is quite offensive. It has a strong odor. It stinks. It'll burn your eyes. It'll burn your sinuses. And what I like to do is I like to turn my dust collector on. And the dust collector, you can't really see it. It's about 3 to 4 inches behind the blank. And I'll turn it on and just let it draw air, and it will suck the fumes away from the pin and away from me, and they'll go across the shop into the shop vac. So I don't have to breathe them. It's a lot less offensive, but you can see it's already got some dull areas starting to show up right there and right there on the front blank. So we're going to need several more coats of thin. I'll come back and show you what this looks like after I've applied all of my coats of thin and we're ready to put the medium on. I've got 5 coats of thin on the blank, and you can see it's kind of got a little bit of a shine to it. You don't see a lot of dull areas in the reflection. That's what we're looking for. So I feel like the blank is good and sealed. It's now ready for me to start applying my medium CA. I apply the medium a little differently. I actually put a dot of medium on a paper towel, and then I apply it. And notice how I rub right off the end of the blank, right onto the bushing. Just take that extra CA right to your bushings. Those bushings you can always put back on your mandrel, and you can turn that CA off of them. Now you might say, well, okay, that makes sense, but on the end of your blanks, you've got like a little bit of a lip there, and you're basically just filling in the lip between the bushing and the blank. That's going to make your components not fit well. You're absolutely right. But what we'll do is, once we get done with the CA, we'll remove the bushings, we'll go over to our sanding jig, and we'll just kiss the edges of these blanks. We'll square them back up, then we'll polish them, and we will have a perfect fit. So do not worry. Take all that CA right off that blank. You don't want a big glob at the end of your blank. So just take it right off the end of the blank onto the bushing. Who cares if it fills in? We'll re-square it, and we're going to get a perfect surface on these blanks. All right, I'm going to go ahead and let this spin for a while. I do not use accelerator on my CA glue. It needs to dry naturally, so this is going to take, it could take 10-15 minutes for that medium CA to dry, and I will apply at a minimum 3 coats. So I'm going to shut the camera off, work on some other things in the shop. We're going to let this spin, and after about 10 minutes I'll come back, apply a second coat, and in another 10 minutes we'll apply the third coat, and I'll show you what this pin looks like right before I take it to the sanding jig and square those ends up. But it looks really nice so far. We're just going to let it spin and dry. I just finished applying the final coat of CA to this blank, and it looks amazing. Super happy with it. What I want to do now is I'm going to go ahead and get these nonstick bushings removed, and we'll use our squaring jig and clean up the ends so we get a nice fit at our components. And then I'll get the original bushings that I turned the blank with, and we'll put those back on the mandrel so that we can micro mesh this blank and get it prepared to go into a kit. With the ends of the blank freshly squared, I've got my turning bushings back on the lathe. I've wetted my micro mesh pad, and we're just going to start micro meshing our blanks, running at about 1100 RPMs. Now we want to be careful here. Normally when I'm doing an acrylic blank, I want to build a really good slurry behind the blank, between the blank and the pad. But you want to be careful when you're doing a CA glue finish, because if you build too much of a slurry, you're going to take the finish right off the pin because it's not that thick. So you just want to look at your pin and watch and feel for any rough spots, and it feels really pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead now and just work through the rest of the pads. You can see a little bit of the slurry starting to build, and that's really all we need, not much at all. Blank looks good. It's nice and smooth. It feels really nice. I don't feel any bumps or little nibs on it from the CA. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and work my way through the pads. I'll shut the camera off. You shouldn't have to watch all of this. And I'll come back when I'm done micro meshing, and we'll take a look at the blank right before we polish it. I have finished micro meshing, and the blank looks fantastic. What I'm going to do now is apply some Renaissance wax. With the wax applied, you can see that the blank looks a little bit hazy. We're going to go ahead now and buff that wax to a nice lustrous shine. Take a quick peek at the front blank. I haven't even buffed it yet. I just basically worked the rosin in, then compare it to the back blank. Just look at the difference. I'm going to run it through one more time, the opposite direction, and then we'll do the bottom blank. Take a look at that blank. Is that not amazing? Let's get this over to the assembly table and get it pressed into a kit. I am ready to assemble my blanks into the kit, and you'll notice that everything is laid out quite nicely right in the box, so I didn't bother removing it. We'll just take it out as we need it. I'm going to go ahead and grab one of my bushings, slide it into the back of my blank. We'll grab the front ferrule. I'm going to flip it around so that the part of the pin that I'm pressing in is actually against the rubber stopper. Then we'll give it a nice little press. Okay. Set that down. Let's grab our cap. We will slide the cap piece into the clip. And I want to show you something here. There's a little notch. See that little notch right there? So you want to twist the clip around until it slides into that little notch. That's going to keep it from spinning once the pin is assembled. We grab our blank. We'll look it over and see if there's a spot. The blank looks amazing. There is one little indentation right here, and I think that is just some of the grain in the oak blank. So we'll go ahead and press this together. Got a really nice fit. Take a look at that. That is beautiful. All right, let's get the lower half of the pin put together. I'm just taking a quick peek at the blank, and the grain kind of tapers as it goes down. I don't know how well you can see that, but see the grain, how it kind of tapers? I like that for the bottom of my pin, so we'll grab the cap for the upper half of the pin, slide it into the back of the pin. We'll put our bushing into the other end. And we'll go ahead and press the cap. We need one more of these little spacers. There we go. All right. That looks really nice. Now let's grab the front piece and go ahead and open this back up. I've got the threads against the rubber spacer just to hopefully protect them. And I'm just taking my time and pressing nice and slow. Okay. Let's grab our ink refill, remove the cap, slide it into the pin. Got our nib section, a little bit of dust in there. There we go, probably from the packing. There's a spring in there. There it is. I could feel the spring. It's giving me quite a bit of tension as I try to thread this together. And I don't want to cross thread it, so I'm trying to be very careful. There we go. That's a tight fit, so that's not going to come loose while you're writing. Now let's try our cap. But something weird happened. Look at that. I don't have the nib sticking out of the pin. I don't know what's going on with that. The spring is actually forcing it back into the pin. Let's just see what we can come up with here. Oh, you know what? I've got it figured out. I know what the problem is. The spring does not belong at the bottom of the pin. The spring actually goes on the back of the pin into the lower end of the cap. Let me get a little punch and push that spring out of there, and then we'll reverse it and put it in on the back end of the pin. Grab the punch. I'm just going to put it in at a little bit of an angle and push. Okay, there's our spring. Now what we're going to do is I'll go ahead and drop the ink refill. This is a roller ball, so it's getting all over my fingers. I don't really use roller ball pens because I'm a lefty, and if I use them I end up getting ink all over the bottom of my hand. All right, now, does that fit there? Yep, look at that. That snaps right into the back of the ink refill and then into the blank. And much better, much better. There we go. That's much better. And then when you're writing, that gives you a little spring. The cap does not post. There we go. Just had to get it started correctly. Take a look at that. That's a nice looking pen. I would really like to thank you for joining me in the shop today. I had a great time turning this pen. I think it's just a classic looking pen. It's just a real nice pen. It's got a good feel to it. And I've been working with the pen and I've learned something. When you put it together, if you put it together at an angle like this, it'll catch every time. But if you take and post the pen or put the pen in perfectly straight, the threads catch perfect every time. So it's just a matter of getting used to applying the cap properly. So that was on me. It's not a problem with the kit. If you're interested in this kit, I will put a link to Chad Schimmel's website in the comments below, so you can go over there and check this out. Maybe you're interested in one of these. I had a great time turning this. I would like for you to know that you are always welcome in my shop. Come back and see me again real soon, and have a great evening.